Talent Code, Daniel Coyle Summary. Get ready for a powerful listening experience with this optimized summary of the Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, a book that shatters the greatest myths we've been told about talent, genius, and natural ability. If you've ever felt that sting of envy while watching someone play an instrument effortlessly, speak multiple languages, or master a skill as if they were born with it and thought they're just naturally gifted, prepare to unlearn everything. This summary isn't just about information, it's about transformation. It's for those who want to understand, deeply and practically, that talent is not some magical quality granted to a lucky few. It's a process that anyone can follow, a process of deliberate effort, neurobiological reshaping, and emotional ignition. So before we go any further, subscribe to the Optimized channel and hit that like button. What you're about to hear is more than a breakdown, it's a guide to mastering yourself. Daniel Coyle starts his journey by investigating some of the world's most unexpected, yet consistent talent hotbeds. These are small, low-profile environments, obscure sports academies in Russia, remote music schools, training groups in poor neighborhoods, places that, against all odds, consistently produce world-class performers. What's the secret? It's not natural gifts, privilege, or genetics. It's method. These places all share a core structure: focused repetition, extreme attention to mistakes, coaches with surgical feedback, and environments built to create tension and inspiration. Coyle sees it repeatedly. Real talent emerges not in places of comfort or luxury, but in zones of struggle and discipline, where every repetition matters and every error is an opportunity. At the heart of this discovery is the concept of deep practice, and this changes everything. Deep practice happens at the edge of your ability, where mistakes occur, not where you're comfortable. This is the zone of neural construction. You don't just go through the motions. You pause, correct, slow down, and repeat with focus. And as you do this, a biological miracle occurs in your brain. Your neurons begin to wrap themselves in myelin, a fatty substance that insulates electrical signals, making them faster, more accurate, and more efficient. Myelin is like broadband. For your nervous system, it increases speed, clarity, and power. It doesn't grow when you repeat what you already know. It grows when you struggle, when you're on the verge of failure and choose to stay and refine. That's why shallow practice, the kind where you breeze through repetitions without thinking, doesn't work. It doesn't trigger growth. The book gives vivid examples. Music students who spend hours slowly practicing difficult segments, deliberately making and correcting mistakes. Athletes who train in cramped, unpredictable environments that force their brains to adapt faster. In these settings, comfort is absent, but acceleration is present. The discomfort becomes the forge of transformation. That tension, it's creative. It's the signal that real growth is happening. Your brain isn't coasting, it's building, mapping, insulating, learning. You're not just doing, you're sculpting who you become. And this is where we reclaim agency. Because once you realize that your brain responds to this kind of focused effort, you begin to see talent not as something others were born with, but something you can build. You stop comparing yourself to the naturally gifted. You start comparing yourself to who you were yesterday. You don't just perform, you practice with intention. You don't just repeat, you improve. That's the power of deep practice. It's not about grinding harder, but smarter, with structure, with feedback, with a clear purpose in mind. And that purpose is not perfection, it's progress. Optimized insights, the practice that builds talent, starts where your ego ends. Every mistake faced with awareness becomes a brick laid in your brain. Talent doesn't emerge, it accumulates, layer by layer, in silence. The second essential layer introduced by Coyle is ignition, the emotional spark that turns casual interest into burning obsession. It's the moment when something clicks inside you, when you see someone performing at a high level and you don't just admire it, you identify with it. You say, that's who I am, that's what I need to do. This emotional charge rewires your sense of self. It transforms effort into mission. And the beauty of ignition is that it's accessible. You can trigger it deliberately, through stories, role models, proximity to excellence, exposure to triumph. Every major talent has a moment of ignition, a turning point where the dream becomes necessity, where effort becomes identity. This emotional component is crucial because deep practice without emotional fuel becomes torture. But when you're emotionally engaged, when you have ignition, the pain becomes meaningful. The errors become challenges instead of shame. You endure more, you stay longer, you push further. And it's not just motivation, it's identity. You're not just trying to get better, you're becoming the kind of person who does this. That difference is everything. and in environments where ignition is cultivated, such as mentorship-driven schools or high-pressure training centers, the results speak for themselves. Excellence becomes normalized. Growth becomes expected. Potential becomes tangible. These moments of ignition can come from anywhere: a conversation, a movie, a victory, a mentor. And once sparked, they create emotional resilience. You begin to see the journey as your destiny, and that keeps you in the game, especially during setbacks. You're no longer waiting for talent to show up, you're building it. Every hour of practice becomes a reflection of who you are. And when that belief is internalized, it's incredibly hard to stop you. Optimized insights without ignition. Training is torture. With it, failure becomes mission. Talent begins when your emotions find direction. The identity you shape today defines your performance tomorrow. When ignition takes hold, it does something even more powerful. It begins to dictate the quality of your effort. It shapes how deeply you engage, how long you persist, and how well you recover from failure. A teenager watches a guitar legend and something inside says, "That's me." And from that moment forward, the hours of frustrating practice are no longer chores. They're steps toward identity. This is where the link between emotion and repetition becomes a superpower. And that emotion needs to be fed and protected. You can't rely on a single spark. You must surround yourself with environments, stories, and people who remind you why you started. Coyle emphasizes that ignition is rechargeable, and that might be the most empowering insight of all. Even when you're burnt out, you can revisit that flame, not with hype, but with real victories, tangible progress, and deep reminders of what matters to you. That's why places that cultivate talent don't just focus on drills. They create symbolic environments, spaces where excellence is visible and stories of growth are celebrated, where you can see your future self in someone ahead of you. For young people, especially, this is transformative. If a child sees a version of themselves who succeeded, it plants a mental seed that can't be easily erased. It becomes a mirror of possibility, and that mirror fuels the will to practice, to endure, to rise. Talent, Coyle argues, is not just biological or technical, it's symbolic. It lives in how you see yourself and how others reflect that back to you. And that brings us to the third pillar of the talent code, the master coach. Here, again, Coyle defies expectation. Great coaches aren't necessarily the most experienced, the most decorated, or the loudest. They are the ones who see through you, who observe without judgment, who notice your mistake before you do and correct it with surgical precision. They know how to create tension, trust, and transformation all at once. A great coach doesn't yell, they guide. They don't chase results, they chase awareness. Their gift is not just knowledge, it's the ability to help you observe yourself, to shift from dependency to mastery. The book introduces incredible examples: violin teachers, basketball trainers, writing mentors. They all have one thing in common: they don't seek instant perfection. They cultivate process consciousness. They teach students to watch themselves, to adjust with intelligence, to become autonomous thinkers. These aren't just instructors, they're emotional sculptors. They shape not just your technique, but your confidence, your mindset, your relationship with failure. And what makes them effective isn't charm or charisma, it's presence, precision, and belief. They believe in you before your talent shows up, and that belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of the book's most powerful truths is this: talent doesn't grow in environments of constant praise, nor does it grow in environments of constant criticism. It grows in spaces that combine challenge with support, places where mistakes are normal, feedback is immediate, and guidance is relentless but compassionate. These are not soft spaces, they're forges, but they're forges where the heat is aimed at growth, not punishment. And this balance, the emotional safety to fail, paired with the relentless push to improve, is what drives sustainable excellence. Optimized insights: a great coach sees your potential before you believe in it. Surgical feedback is more powerful than empty praise. The right environment doesn't protect you, it forges you. Together, these three pillars: deep practice, ignition, and the master coach, form what Coyle calls the talent ecosystem. Each one supports the others. You practice deeply because something inside you burns. You make mistakes boldly because someone guides you. You persist through frustration because you believe this is who you are. It's not a solo mission. It's an environment, a loop, a culture. And it can be built anywhere: a classroom, a small bedroom, a local gym. Talent doesn't require privilege. It requires intentional design. It needs decisions, repetition, vulnerability, the belief that failure is part of the construction, not the end of the road. This is what makes Coyle's work so powerful. He removes talent from the realm of mystery and places it into the hands of ordinary people, willing to do extraordinary work. He reminds us that the biology of excellence is not reserved for the few. It's available to those who show up with focus, emotion, and guidance. Talent isn't a gift, it's a process of rewiring your brain, day after day. And this process doesn't depend on how you start. It depends on how often you return, on how well you absorb correction, on how you use your failures every repetition. With intention is an act of self-definition. That's the secret behind every master. They didn't just train more, they trained smarter, with emotional depth and structural clarity. They didn't always feel motivated, but they stayed in motion. They failed but understood why. They weren't perfect, but they were awake inside their learning. And that state of being fully present, emotionally engaged, and technically focused is what forges brilliance. Optimized insights. Talent is a living organism. It needs tension, correction, attention, and decision. You don't need to be born ready, you need to be brave enough to rebuild. Excellence is not handed to you, it's constructed, one deliberate act at a time. With the 3 pillars firmly established: deep practice, ignition, and the master coach. Daniel Coyle dives even deeper into a territory most books only skim: the micro details that build mastery. Instead of leaning on vague inspiration or general ideas, Coyle delivers 52 practical techniques that are shockingly simple, often invisible, but deeply effective. These are not flashy hacks or shortcuts. They are based on the neuroscience of learning, on how the brain actually wires itself through attention, feedback, and purposeful action. And that's the key. Talent is not a leap. It's a staircase made of tiny, intentional steps repeated over time. These micro-strategies include slowing down during practice, isolating mistakes, training in unpredictable conditions, analyzing other people's errors, simulating pressure, and alternating environments. Each technique strengthens the learning loop because your brain doesn't crave routine, it craves structured novelty. It wants challenge, but it also wants a sense of safety. That's the paradox of accelerated learning. It happens in environments that are stable enough to support growth, but uncomfortable enough to provoke adaptation. And that's why your mindset matters so much. Coyle emphasizes that the mental frame you activate during training changes the entire outcome. If you approach each session with openness to mistakes, clarity of purpose, and a long-term view of identity, your brain will respond differently. It will learn deeper. It will retain more. You won't just do, you'll build. And the act of building rewires your self-perception. You begin to identify as a learner, a builder, a doer. You start to seek environments that stretch you, feedback that sharpens you, and routines that challenge you. That's why culture is critical. In environments where effort is praised, where failure is normalized, where small wins are celebrated, talent doesn't just emerge, it multiplies. And this is especially true when you're surrounded by others on the same journey. The struggle becomes shared, the comparison turns into motivation, the discomfort becomes expected. When you normalize discomfort, you train the brain to associate it not with danger, but with growth, and that's the turning point. That's when your nervous system starts treating pressure as fuel and mistakes as guides. Coyle calls this the construction zone of talent. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it's real. It's where transformation happens. It's in the extra repetition when no one's watching, the correction you apply after the 10th mistake, the day you show up even when you feel stuck. These aren't grand moments. They're ordinary choices made with extraordinary consistency. That's how genius is built, brick by brick, under pressure, with patience, and more than anything, this journey requires a decision. A choice to believe in process over promise, in effort over ease, in identity over ego. Talent, at its core, is a decision to return, to adjust, to focus, to grow. It's not reserved, it's not inherited, it's constructed, and that means it's available. Optimized insights. Talent doesn't grow in sprints, it grows in repeated, mindful steps. Fast learning comes from paying attention to the details others ignore. The right environment turns pressure into propulsion and errors into direction. As the book closes, Daniel Coyle delivers a message that is equal parts science and soul. Talent is human. It's emotional. It's built, not born. Your brain is not fixed. Your identity is not locked. Your potential is not capped. Everything can be trained. Everything can be constructed. And each time you show up with intention, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, you're casting a vote for your future excellence. Every deliberate repetition is a vote. Every focused correction is a statement. Every day you commit to learning, even imperfectly, is an act of self-authorship. Because genius isn't something you are, it's something you build. And that staircase of mastery, it's already in front of you. All that remains is your willingness to climb. So if this optimized summary of the talent code helped you reframe your understanding of talent, subscribe to the optimized channel, hit the like button, and join our journey. We bring you powerful, emotionally resonant, and practical breakdowns of the world's best books on personal development, high performance, success psychology, and brain science. Stay with us, we've got more transformation chat.